Deirdre and Richard. It sounds like, especially from Deirdre, the concern is that even in an era where we have extremely high signal-to-noise detections with LISA events, that we may be limited by our ability to simulate waveforms with current technology. First of all, am I saying that right? And second of all, if I did, is that a fundamental limitation, or is that a limitation in our current implementations? That is there something in the way in which GR works and the way in which you simulate waveforms where, 16-bit floating bit precision is actually not going to be good enough in the end, or 64-bit precision is not going to be good enough for us to truly test GR?
Yeah, I think you said that right. I don't think that we actually have a fundamental problem. I think we have an implementation problem.
Okay.
We don't, if you gave me 1 million cores, I couldn't improve enough with, I think, the current technology for most groups. So that's more the worry, not that we actually will have a flaw at the end of the day. When it comes to things like intermediate mass, I can't easily tell you what our right path should be, because it might not be, even if we improve our mesh refinement, et cetera, we might not get there in time. So that one I think is a harder problem, but if you stayed with the more equal mass, then I think our fundamental limit is, at the moment, implementation. We have to get better. Do you want to say something?
Other
self-feedback. So in the past there was a lot of interaction between numerical relativists and data analysis specialists. So who do you imagine it in the next 20 years? What is the way to interact? So you just tell numerical relativists that this is what we need and they will deliver, or they just deliver what they want and you use it. Yeah. See, there is a way.
So my sense of things is some data analysis tools are getting easier to use, and we can. Numerical relativity is hard, and some of the data analysis tools are easier. So some of the things we can throw over the fence and say, if you do this, you can run this test, and then we can be sure it's good enough for us. But conversely, you may want to know things and say, would these sorts of things be good enough? So let me pass this to you. I know I'm throwing all the time codes over the fence to you, so.
As long as they're documented. No, I'm kidding. I'm fine with you. I actually think what we learned from we called it NINJA. I don't remember why, numerical injection analysis or something. And NRDA days was that we actually, I think, now have some numerical relativists who speak the language a bit better. So I think looking forward, I'm not too worried that we won't continue to collaborate and therefore move faster than we could. I guess I'm worried that the assumption is with binary black holes that we kind of did our job, and so retire, and instead it's more like, oh, maybe we really will miss out some science if we can't motivate the community to continue to do hard work in building codes. So that's where I've come from with this talk in mind. That I'm just trying to make sure everyone stays and they have the right information so that if you write a proposal to get funding, because it's not cheap to write new codes, it's the right thing. We understand what are the sciences and what we need to do.
So
staying on the same theme, at what point you're going to be limited by calibration, and what did you assume in terms of calibration for the kind of precision testing that you've laid out, both for ground-based and space-based interferometers?
When are we going to be bugged by calibration? Like when will we at systematic error? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, what did you assume, for example? Is it 1%, 2%, 5%? How many degrees? And how does that play with the whatever the computation that's needed for every of those events?
So the really low level, we would do things like you want a mismatch of less than a certain percent, right? So I think the canonical thing was always, 0.98 and higher. And I think if you want to do the real work, then you have to do the injections that Richard was talking about. And then I think you need a true collaboration to inject the numerical relativity waveforms, whatever waveforms you have, and literally see its impact on parameter estimation and stuff. That's the gold standard.
Yeah, and for calibration error, the calibration team are great. The calibration mainly affects sky localization, which I think a lot of people in the room really care about. But from the numerical relativity side of things, you're really trying to interpret the source. So if it's just moving the source around on the sky and not changing the intrinsic parameters, it's not something that improving waveform standards is always going to help. I haven't seen a detailed demonstration at really high SNR. So I can't say anything definitive, but my sense of things is that would be more of an issue for, late A+ sort of things, kind of to order of magnitude. I have some standard things I can show you later.
So this is a little bit of a comment, more than a question, since the session title this morning was the science of MMA, of multi-messenger, and since I work for IceCube, I kind of have a different bias to it. So this session this morning was kind of biased on gravitational waves, and it made it kind of sound like gravitational waves is multi-messenger, and I wanted to point out, like Azadeh said that it is more, and for example, my own bias is that there is also a huge space of potential future discoveries in, for example, neutrino and gamma coincidences, but of course also neutrinos and gravitational waves. So as a community, when we build tools, we shouldn't only focus on them. That I realize why gravitational waves are great, right? This is great, but we should making sure that the focus is beyond that too. So it's a comment, and I'm not sure if there's an answer to that.
It's a good comment. Any other questions? Can I actually poke you guys a little bit with something? So we heard a lot of cool talks yesterday about physics in machine learning. You were talking about the science today, and so where do you see opportunities related to machine learning and in our inference problems in multi-messenger astrophysics?
So that was the stuff that I ran past on. I think that there are enormous opportunities in the population model space and in the waveform model space. The models, well, just from the waveform model space, which is relatively well under control, but we don't have anything that's covering all the physics that we need at all. I think Daniel is in the, so there is work being done to push the boundaries of that, but, he's coming in now. But it's not, we haven't reached the level of maturity that we need just to do all the physics that we need now. For example, if you have an eccentric precessing binary that you might get in some of these AGN disk formation scenarios. What do we got? We do simulations, yeah. So, So my sense of things is there's a lot to be done just on the waveform modeling side, just to cover our bases for things that we expect could be very significant. And it would be a nightmare right now to deal with it. So a lot of work there, if needed, would be needed fast. So we might as well start now. The other thing that I think is really going to explode soon is the astrophysical formation modeling is very high dimensional and hard, and benefits enormously from training to optimize to make the simulations faster, but also to provide an emulator for the models because they're nightmarishly complicated. And there's no way that you can do them on the scale that's needed to do any reliable inference at all, unless you do very aggressive things. And we're doing very aggressive things, but it would be nice to have, to be able to do less aggressive things because someone had developed easy to use, reliable emulators that will capture sharp features and strong dependence and appearance of multiple subpopulations with small changes of parameters. The sorts of things that happen when you do a real formation genome. And you wanted to comment on agendas?
Yeah, so I see a threefold interest in machine learning. One is in the instrument space, other is in the discovery space, and third one is in the social space. So we can make the instrument better, we can make the data less noisy, we can discover things that are not necessarily discoverable without machine learning, and most importantly, we can attract top talent, because machine learning is something where early career scientists can see a huge career opportunity to attract bright minds. So all these three are very important for us, I think.
I just want to add one thing to the instrument part, because this is something which can be done right now and somewhat being done right now. You have seen some of our events being retracted, some of them having, for those who are not watching us, we actually have, and there were some slides, some percent probability on whether an event was terrestrial, BBH, BNS, etc. So on the terrestrial part, really by understanding the instrument better, we can do much better on that, and machine learning can help and already is helping to some extent. We just didn't discuss that, but I think it's an important part in the LIGO effort.
So I can continue after, so go ahead with your question, Josh. Okay, so I just wanted to also say that in IceCube we use machine learning. I don't know if Mirko is around. I saw him yesterday. So he uses the machine learning methods for distinguishing between the two geometrical shapes that neutrinos actually produce in the ice. We have two different types of interactions. So we get very nice track-like events and more like cascade-like events or showers that are very harder to point back to their direction and make a good localization. But it's also hard, it's a very difficult task to distinguish these in real time. Currently we have several analysis going on in real time, and one of them is using deep neural network to distinguish track-like events from the shower-like events, and that's actually performing very well. So hopefully in future we can implement that for our real-time alerts.
So it seems like we're talking about bolting machine learning onto things that already exist. So living alongside analysis that was done before machine learning, and maybe trying to compete with it in a real-time sense, or doing something with hardware where you're replacing subsystems that were done with traditional systems optimization, and then adding some reinforcement learning or something like that to do better. But what we heard yesterday from Laura Waller was this idea that we should be designing our hardware with a notion of how we're going to be analyzing the data. Is that starting to happen in your communities, where, as you think about next generation or beyond, where people are saying, let's design hardware in a different way and take data in a different way because we know that we'll have these advanced techniques, and co-developing those techniques at the same time you're developing hardware?
So traditionally, at least in gravitational waves, the development for the instrument was very simple. Instrument scientist. No. The idea is very simple. The execution is not. Yeah. So the idea was that we give you the best detector we can, and then you do whatever you can with it. Yeah. So for the future, this idea is being propagated. So in a sense, instrument scientists know what they can get out of the current technology. Now we have multiple choices. Say, do we focus our money on the high frequency? Do we focus our money on the low frequency, or both? Yeah. So we have at least a few choices that is science driven, but it is very far from what Josh is asking. That we start with astrophysics, we start with data analysis, and design the detector to actually fit the methods we are using. So it's vice versa. We get the best detector humanity can build, maybe with some choices, and then come up with some methods to use the data.
Well, I'm going to be less pessimistic about that, because maybe the detector is built, but I think there's a lot we do in detector characterization, where if we do detector characterization, if there's a way of instrumenting the way we're looking at the detector in a way that makes it easier to go back and retrofit and then pull things out, right?
Yeah, I mean, myself, one of my interests in machine learning within LIGO is using the actual channels which are not related to the gravitational wave data to tell us something, what happens in the rest of the detector when there are glitches and all sorts of noise problems. This can definitely inform the commissioners to look for certain areas of the detector where problems are surfacing. But this is the level where I see right now. I think your question was a lot more futuristic in that sense. I agree with Sabi. I actually think that there are some efforts within LIGO to, and disagreements also, to go towards trying to lock LIGO via more or less on the machine learning way. So we are very far from that. But there are some people who would like to move to that direction. I actually like that idea. We would have to show this, like even just being able to control one of the suspensions with a machine learning background. We are very far from that right now. But there were some experiments done at the 40 meter which look promising. So on the long run, I think this can happen. And, you know, we have how many years until 3G, so I wouldn't give it up. But I think that we have to understand that process. How can we do the locking part using machine learning?
So it's... Okay, so this is an answer to that question maybe for IceCube, where we're building an upgrade basically to do better better calibration. Our main systematic error is the knowledge of the glacial ice, and so we are building an upgrade to study that better, and we are building so many new sensors and devices. And I think a couple of years ago, we would have built a much simpler detector, and we have the confidence now to build more different devices because we have all of these tools now. And in the past, we would have probably built a very simple detector up upgrade, and now we are adding many more different devices to it because we know that all of these methods exist. So that is maybe a way where these methods help, but it hasn't really informed the DM sign yet for us either.
And again, we're